Russians are afraid of winter this time, because this winter won't be like the past ones. The war with Ukraine has turned the cold into a weapon, and every drop in temperature reminds Moscow how fragile its energy lifeline has become. Ukrainian drones aren't just hitting random targets, they are striking at the core of Russia's survival. Gas depots, refineries, compressor stations, and storage hubs that keep homes warm and armies moving. When one of these sites goes down, pressure in pipelines drops, gas flows halt, and entire regions are forced to ration fuel. Repairs take weeks, sometimes months, especially under fire. The result is a creeping fear that Russia's vast energy network, once a source of national pride, is now a battlefield weakness. The war has come home, and Russia's society is collapsing before Putin's eyes. For the Kremlin, nothing is unfolding as planned. The crisis is now threatening the very foundations of its power. The nation's brightest minds, doctors, engineers, programmers, and other skilled professionals, are leaving in a mass exodus, seeking a future beyond Russia's borders. This wave of departure and disillusionment has become a greater danger to Putin's regime than any defeat on the battlefield. Even the younger generation, once silent, is now rising to protest against the war. The cracks are widening. Watch it for yourself. But why Ukraine is targeting Russia's energy infrastructure? On October 16, 2025, Moscow made a choice that would change the course of the war. Believing Ukraine distracted and vulnerable, it unleashed one of its largest aerial assaults in months, over 300 drones and 37 missiles raining down across Ukrainian skies. In less than 72 hours, Russia paid for its arrogance. The timing was no accident. President Zelensky was abroad, attending high-level meetings with allies. For the Kremlin, it was the perfect moment to strike. The Guardian titled it, "Russia bombards Ukraine's gas sites," as Zelensky flies to US for Trump meeting. But 3 days later, that headline changed. Reuters published a new one. Giant Russian gas plant suspends intake from Kazakhstan after Ukrainian drone strike. And this is how it happened. That night, sirens wailed across Ukraine. Cities from Lviv to Dnipro were shaken awake as missiles tore through the sky. In Kharkiv, power stations were hit. In Odessa, emergency crews raced to contain fires. Transformers exploded, hospitals switched to backup power, and darkness spread across neighborhoods already scarred by war. It was an attack not on soldiers, but on civilians, a strike designed to freeze a nation before winter. Many called it an attack from behind, a show of weakness disguised as strength, a reminder that when Russia cannot win on the battlefield, it turns its weapons toward the innocent. But what Putin didn't expect was that Ukraine had already seen it coming. Inside Kiev's intelligence command, the SBU and GUR had been tracking Russian preparations for days. Encrypted communications, satellite heat signatures, and drone movements painted a clear picture of what Moscow planned to do. So when the missiles came, Ukraine's air defense network was ready. Most were intercepted mid-air, but the few that got through were enough to test Ukraine's endurance. They hit fuel depots, switching stations, and distribution nodes, infrastructure vital to the nation's power grid. Still, what Russia believed would break Ukraine's spirit only sharpened its focus. And 3 days later, Ukraine proved it could strike back harder, deeper, and with precision that stunned the world. On October 19th at dawn, the quiet plains of Russia's Orenburg region were torn apart by a sudden explosion. A Ukrainian long-range drone, launched hundreds of kilometers away, had reached its target, the Gazprom-operated Orenburg gas processing plant, one of the largest facilities of its kind on Earth. The strike was clean, direct, and devastating. Within minutes, fire engulfed the complex, forcing operators to shut down critical systems and halt the intake of natural gas from Kazakhstan. By midday, Reuters confirmed what Moscow tried to hide. A giant Russian gas plant has suspended intake from Kazakhstan after a Ukrainian drone strike. In a single operation, Ukraine had done what Russia believed impossible, carried the war 1,000 kilometers inside Russian territory, and hit the heart of its energy empire. For 3 days, Russia's state television had glorified its October 16th assault, showing maps of Ukraine's energy network and claiming victory. But now, those same anchors were forced to explain why one of Russia's largest gas processing facilities was burning uncontrollably. The humiliation was total. This wasn't random retaliation. It was strategy. While Russia attacked Ukraine's grid to spread fear, Ukraine struck back at the machinery that powers Russia's war. The difference was clear. Russia bombed civilians. Ukraine dismantled an army's supply lines. Behind the strike lay weeks of intelligence preparation. Ukraine's engineers had built a new generation of domestically produced drones capable of traveling over 1,000 kilometers with near-silent flight paths. They used satellite data and electronic countermeasure mapping to identify a corridor through Russian radar coverage. Flying low, skimming tree lines and valleys, the drones moved undetected until the final descent. Each carried a warhead designed not to flatten buildings, but to ignite industrial systems. Targeted explosives meant to set energy complexes ablaze from within. When the drone reached Orenburg, its camera transmitted one final image: the silhouette of cooling towers shimmering in early dawn light. Then the feed went dark. Seconds later, a shockwave rippled through the facility. Gas flared, pipes ruptured, and columns of black smoke rose high enough to be seen from kilometers away. By the time Russian emergency crews arrived, the damage was irreversible. The Kremlin called it terrorism. Kyiv called it consequence. For every missile Russia sent into Ukrainian cities, another drone would find its way toward a refinery, a depot, or a power station inside Russia. It was a new kind of warfare, not defined by front lines, but by reach and precision. And Ukraine was winning it. As reports of the Orenburg fire spread, the shock within Russia was palpable. Energy officials scrambled to explain how a drone had traveled such distance undetected. Fuel shipments to military bases were delayed. Pipeline flows from Kazakhstan were disrupted. And in several Russian regions, localized blackouts began as the system struggled to reroute capacity. The country that once tried to plunge Ukraine into darkness was now facing its own. For Ukraine, the message was clear and deliberate. This was not about revenge. It was about deterrence, about showing that if Russia continued to attack civilian infrastructure, the consequences would reach far beyond the battlefield. And it was working. In Moscow, intelligence reports warned that Ukrainian drones could now reach as far as the Ural Mountains, deep into industrial and logistical hubs once considered untouchable. Suddenly, Russian governors were demanding new air defenses, new restrictions, new guarantees of safety that the Kremlin could not provide. The fear that Putin once hoped to instill in Ukrainians had turned inward. By the fourth day, Russia's propaganda machine was faltering. State media tried to minimize the scale of the Orenburg strike, describing it as a minor fire. But satellite images told another story. Vast burn scars, melted infrastructure, and emergency units still working around the clock. Kazakhstan confirmed that gas transfers to the plant had been halted indefinitely, and Western analysts reported that the attack could disrupt Russia's processing capacity for weeks. Economically, it was a bruise. Psychologically, it was a fracture. Because if Ukraine could hit Orenburg, it could hit anything. Since August, Ukraine had quietly carried out at least 58 such operations. Refineries, depots, and terminals across Russia had been targeted, some near the border. others nearly 2,000 kilometers away. Each one executed with precision and minimal collateral damage. This was not chaos. It was chess, and every move forced Moscow to play defense. The Orenburg strike marked a turning point. It showed that Ukraine's war was no longer about survival alone. It was about control. Control of tempo, control of geography, control of the narrative. Russia's October 16th barrage had aimed to humiliate Ukraine while its president was abroad. Instead, it exposed how vulnerable Russia truly was. In trying to strike from behind, Moscow revealed its weakness, and Ukraine exploited it perfectly. Zelensky's response was measured, almost cold. He did not gloat, did not issue threats. When asked about the Orenburg incident, he said only, "We do not seek darkness for others. We seek light for our people." Those words echoed across media worldwide. They carried the calm confidence of a leader who no longer reacted to aggression, but defined its outcome. Meanwhile, inside Russia, fear replaced bravado. Air defense units were redeployed from occupied territories back into central regions. Refinery security was tightened. Civilian flights were quietly rerouted away from critical infrastructure zones. For the first time, Russian territory was being defended like a front line. And that realization, that Ukraine could strike anywhere, changed the entire psychology of the war. By late October, the smoke over Orenburg had thinned, but the memory remained. Every Russian citizen who saw that footage knew what it meant. The war they had watched from a distance was no longer distant. It had reached them. It was in their sky, their pipelines, their sense of safety. And every night, as anti-aircraft searchlights swept across industrial zones, that reality grew harder to ignore. For Ukraine, the strike wasn't just a military success, it was a declaration of capability. A demonstration that technology and intelligence could outweigh size and numbers. While Russia relied on missiles built decades ago, Ukraine was inventing the future of modern warfare in real time. Drones that thought, maneuvered, and struck with precision that no general could predict. Each mission was proof that innovation, not intimidation, now defined the battlefield. The irony was complete. Russia had begun this phase of the war believing that fear could force Ukraine into submission. Instead, fear had crossed the border and settled in Russian homes. The lights that once dimmed over Kiev now flickered over Belgorod, Kursk, and Orenburg. Each blackout, each explosion, each intercepted drone whispered the same message: that Putin's power had boundaries, and Ukraine had found them. When the dust settled, both nations faced winter. But only one had momentum. Ukraine's resilience had turned into reach, its defense into deterrence, and its silence into consequence. The strike on Orenburg was not a message written in fire, it was a warning written in precision, the kind that cannot be ignored. By November, analysts across Europe agreed. Russia's October 16th offensive had backfired completely. Its aim to demoralize had instead unified. Its attempt to display strength had revealed fragility. And its hope to isolate Ukraine had rallied the world around it once more. Every drone launched, every refinery struck, every blackout inside Russia carried the same signature: a country refusing to be terrorized. In less than 72 hours, Russia learned what Ukraine had warned from the beginning: that every act of aggression carries a cost measured not in propaganda or speeches, but in smoke rising over its own territory. Putin's strike on October 16th was meant to send a message. Ukraine's response on October 19th delivered one instead. And that message was simple: power is not what you destroy, it's what you can reach.